Welcome back to the channel, folks. Today we are going to do an exercise in list making. A couple weeks ago, a good friend of mine, Tim Talks Talkies, posted a video and he detailed his favorite movie for every year that he was born. And I really thought it was a great idea. I love these mental exercises of having to look up movies, making lists, and really taxing your mind to make decisions on things. Now, overall, I really have a bunch of favorite movies, but to break it down year by year is a very interesting concept. And I would say any BlueTuber should really try this exercise. It's a great look at your movie viewing over the years, things that have came out, and just overall your favorite movies. So I will either link the video up here if I can figure out how to do the banner, but I will definitely link Tim and that video down here. And if you're not following Tim Talks Talkies, I don't know what you're doing with your life. He's a great guy. He's very knowledgeable, has a tremendous collection, and it's just not Blu-rays and movies and that. He does statues, posters, books, soundtracks. Great YouTube channel. Give him a follow. He is a fantastic guy. So, what I'm going to do, I was born in 1979, so this is going to span from 1979 to 2021, 41 years. I believe that's 41. But directly behind my camera, I've got my list on my computer, so I will be looking off to the side of the camera, and I'll name a few movies that came out that year, and then give my favorite movie. And I do have all the physical copies next to me, so I'll get to show them off as well. So, this is going to be the video for this week. My favorite movie every year I have been born. So let's get into this. 1979 is where we are going to start. And this will be 42 years. I know I said 41 in the intro, but it's 42. I'm 42 now, going to be 43. I subtracted the wrong year. So in 1979, a couple of my favorite movies that came out that year were Apocalypse Now, Mad Max, The Muppet Movie, and The Warriors. But my favorite movie of that year most definitely had to be the original sci-fi movie, Alien. Great story. You get a great, powerful female lead in this. And it's the first time you really see something out in space that is just scary. 1979, Alien. Moving on to 1980. The Blues Brothers. I watch it every time I see it on TV. Caddyshack. You've got Stephen King's The Shining, which is a great horror movie. And you also have Star Wars, The Empire Strikes Back, which I will probably argue is the strongest out of all the Star Wars movies. But for my 1980 pick, a movie I always go back to, I watched all the time with my godfather as a kid, and I love this movie. The Final Countdown. Of course, it's the story of the USS Nimitz going back in time through a portal that opens up in the ocean, and they're on the eve of Pearl Harbor, and they are tasked with the difficult decision. Do they intervene and change history and not know their own fates, or do they let it happen and have to deal with the grief that they know they could have changed it? Final Countdown, my pick for 1980. Moving on to 1981, this is going to be a little bit of a weird pick, but I really love this because I read the magazine and the books and stuff that accompanied this movie, and then Ivan Reitman made this movie. But other things that came out in 1981, An American Werewolf in London, Escape from New York, we got our first taste of The Evil Dead, Raiders of the Lost Ark, and Stripes. But my pick, a very, I think, overlooked movie probably, Heavy Metal. Now, it's an animated movie, and like I said, it's based on a magazine series, and it's got basically the story of a green orb that comes to Earth and goes through several different stories, and it finally meets its match. But Heavy Metal, if you've never seen it, I highly recommend it. It's a great early 80s animated movie. And that's my pick for 1981. 1982, 48 Hours, Poltergeist, Rambo First Blood, which by far is probably the best. The Thing, John Carpenter classic. But for my pick for 1982, a movie I seen in the theaters and it scared me to death, but I love it. And that's E.T. You can never go wrong with this Steven Spielberg movie. You know, alien comes to Earth, a little boy finds him and tries to hide him, help him get home, and the government wants him. Great movie. Still holds up today. 1983, we get National Lampoon's Vacation. Probably one of the best National Lampoon's movies. We get My Favorite Christmas Movie, A Christmas Story. We get Star Wars Return of the Jedi, Nicolas Cage, Valley Girl, Matthew Broderick in a very clever movie, War Games. But I'm going to go with my favorite, probably Al Pacino movie ever, Scarface. Of course, it's the story of a man that comes up in Florida, gets in the drug trade, and he becomes the top dog. And then you watch his fall down. So, for my pick, 1983, Scarface. Moving on to 84, some of my favorites. Beverly Hills Cop comes out. We're introduced to Eddie Murphy and Axel Foley. Great movie. Ghostbusters, Gremlins, Last Starfighter, which I think is an underrated movie. Police Academy, and we get our first look at Arnold Schwarzenegger as the Terminator. But for my pick, and something that was influential on me getting into martial arts movies, we're going to go with The Karate Kid. Love this movie, love this series. Of course, this is the new 4K set. But it's a story about a kid coming into town, trying to fit in. He gets bullied. He does do some bullying himself. He meets a man that tries to straighten him up, and he learns life lessons. And in the end, he becomes something, and he does reconcile his differences with other people. 1984, The Karate Kid. Moving on to 85, we've got The Breakfast Club. We've got Commando, which is probably one of the greatest schlocky 80s movies ever with Arnold Schwarzenegger. The Goonies. I get introduced to Jackie Chan in The Police Story. We get Weird Science, which was a great movie. But of course, I think everybody picks for 1985, and that is Back to the Future with Michael J. Fox and Christopher Lloyd. This whole series, strong throughout, 1 through 3. Of course, this is the Steelbook collection, if I can get them out. So Back to the Future 1. That is my choice for 1985. Love these movies. Great concept. Still holds up today. Now moving on to 1986. We get the follow-up to Alien and Aliens. We get one of my favorite John Carpenter movies, Big Trouble in Little China. Flight of the Navigator. Karate Kid Part 2. We get one of my favorite Stephen King adaptations in Maximum Overdrive. Platoon. Johnny Five is Alive in Short Circuit. We get the coming-of-age movie, which was fantastic, Stand By Me. We get the comedy, Three Amigos. We get a look at Top Gun. But my bang for the buck that year, and a movie that had me crying about 20 minutes in, Transformers, the movie. Now, I recently did Plat X2 The 5, and this was something that I brought up on Remembering in Childhood. I loved Transformers. I loved G.I. Joe as well. But when they said this movie was coming out, I was super hyped. And I begged my mom to go see it. And we went and seen it. And their marketing strategy was about 20 minutes into the movie, they killed off everybody so they could boot up their second series of Toy Line. But Transformers the movie, I was so happy to see this on big screen. And that is my pick for 1986. Now, 1987. Beverly Hills Cop 2, Evil Dead 2, Full Metal Jacket, G.I. Joe the movie. We get to look at Lethal Weapon, Plane, Trains, and Automobiles. We see The Princess Bride, which is a fantastic movie. Nicolas Cage in a funny role, Raising Arizona. We get a look at RoboCop, which almost edged my pick out. We see Schwarzenegger in probably one of the greatest sci-fi movies of the 80s as well, The Running Man. And we get The Untouchables, which was a fantastic story. But my pick for 1987, The Predator. This movie was fantastic. Big macho guys going in to clear out a little clan of people, and then they get hunted by a relentless killing machine. Love this movie, and this is my pick for 1987. And moving on to 88, we get a Tim Burton classic, Beetlejuice. We see Eddie Murphy again in Coming to America. Rain Man, They Live, one of my favorites, Who Framed Roger Rabbit, and then one of my favorite westerns, Young Guns. But to take 1988, I cannot take it away from the greatest Christmas movie ever made. Bruce Willis as John McClane in Die Hard. Fantastic movie. I mean, you've got the hero that doesn't want to be there. He has to come in, he has to save the day. And it's just an all-around fantastic movie. And of course, Alan Rickman as Hans Gruber is probably one of the best villains we got in the 80s, and probably have gotten at all time. Moving on to 1989, Back to the Future Part 2, Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. We get a great movie from Tom Cruise in Born in the 4th of July. The Burbs, we see Dolph Lundgren as the Punisher, which was fantastic. One of my childhood favorite musicians in Weird Al Yankovic, we get UHF. We get Uncle Buck with John Candy, which I thought was a great dark comedy. We get to see Nintendo put out a movie in The Wizard with Fred Savage. But nothing will beat Michael Keaton in Tim Burton's Batman, 1989. The world that Tim Burton gave to us in this was fantastic. It was colorful but dark. You cannot go wrong with Jack Nicholson as the Joker. And like I said, Michael Keaton kills it as Batman. For 1989, we're going with The Batman. 1990, Edward Scissorhands, Home Alone, Kindergarten Cop. One of my secret favorites, Navy SEALs. It's a guilty pleasure movie. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the live action. It was fantastic to see Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles jump to the big screen. Total Recall. And we get a Kevin Bacon classic in Tremors. My 1990 pick, a Martin Scorsese movie, which is not my favorite Martin Scorsese movie, but probably my second favorite, Goodfellas. The cast in this is great. The story is great. The brutality is great. The mob life is great. You cannot go wrong with 1990s Martin Scorsese's Goodfellas. And that is my pick. Moving on to 91. Another great year. Backdraft. We get a little movie called Barton Fink, which was fantastic. We get to see the early evolution of Leon the Professional and La Femme Nikita by Luc Besson. Great movie. We get to cry at the end of My Girl when we lose Macaulay Culkin. We get the fantastic thriller Silence of the Lambs. But nothing in 1991 will beat Terminator 2 Judgment Day. Now, of course, hopefully everybody has seen this, but the follow-up to Terminator turns it on its head, and you see Sarah Connor become an unstoppable machine. And of course, the Terminator comes back to help them out, and this movie blew everybody away. It blew me away, and to this day, it still holds up. Now, if we could just get a good 4K transfer, everybody would be happy. 1992, Batman Returns, The Mighty Ducks, My Cousin Vinny, fantastic movie. We get to finally see a Tarantino full piece in Reservoir Dogs. We get the great Western from Clint Eastwood in Unforgiven. And we get the comedy from Wesley Snipes and Woody Harrelson in White Men Can't Jump. I love that movie. The first time I seen this movie, I was already interested in martial arts, but I haven't dipped my toes at this point into any other kind of Asian cinema. I got this on a very poorly bootlegged DVD back in the day, and I watched it, and I fell in love. And Chow Yun-fat is probably my second favorite martial artist. Second or third. But I also fell in love with John Woo and his movies at the time too. Hard Boiled. Now this is about Detective Tequila going on the mob, taking on the mob, and this has one of the longest shootouts in the hospital scene in the end. I forget how long it goes, but it's one of the longest uninterrupted shootouts. And this movie is fantastic. I fell in love with Chow Yun-fat. I fell in love with John Woo. I fell in love with Asian cinema with this movie. So, 1992 brings us Hard Boiled. 1993, we get Army of Darkness. Fantastic ending of a trilogy. Carlito's Way. Dazed and Confused. One of my favorites, Dragon, the Bruce Lee story. The telling of Bruce Lee's life is great. We get a real-life man having a breakdown and taking on a city and falling down. We get Groundhog Day, Jurassic Park, Rudy, The Sandlot, Schindler's List, my favorite Western in Tombstone, and one of my favorite heartfelt movies, What's Eating Gilbert Grape. But for 1993, I got to give it to a Tony Scott film with a screenplay by Tarantino in True Romance. This movie is fantastic from beginning to end. You've got Christian Slater, Patricia Arquette, Dennis Hopper, Val Kilmer, Gary Oldman, Brad Pitt, Christopher Walken, a score by Hans Zimmer. Like I said, writing by Quentin Tarantino. This movie is fantastic. True Romance definitely takes my 1993 favorite pick. Now moving on to 1994, this was no questions. I wrote down some stuff that I liked that year, but 1994 has easily my top one or top two favorite movie of the years of anything. But 1994, we got to look at Clerks from Kevin Smith. We finally get introduced to Kevin Smith. We get Dumb and Dumber, Forrest Gump, Leon the Professional, Natural Born Killers, Pulp Fiction, which is probably my favorite Tarantino. We get the classic Shawshank Redemption. We get introduced to Keanu Reeves in Speed. We also get True Lies. And when will we ever get that 4K, Cameron? Come on. But my 1994 pick, the movie I went to the theater the most for, 8 or 9 times, I wish I really knew, Brandon Lee in The Crow. When this movie came out, of course, he was killed during the filming of it. And when I went and seen this movie, it made it even more special because it was remembrance of a great person. I loved his dad, Bruce Lee. I loved the stuff that he had done up to this point. And this was a swan song of a movie for him. The Crow, 1994, my favorite movie. And one of my favorite movies of all time. 1995. 90s were great. I don't know if you've noticed, there's great titles throughout the 90s. And I'm not even listing all the titles that came out. These are just some of my favorites. But we get 12 Monkeys, Apollo 13. We get introduced to Martin Lawrence and Will Smith in Bad Boys. We've got the first of the trilogy, of the Before trilogy, Before Sunrise, which is fantastic if you've never watched it. We get Adam Sandler and Billy Madison. We get Mel Gibson's Braveheart. We get Robert Rodriguez's Desperado. We get Heat, which Heat was very, very close to being my pick. We get a hard-watching Kids, Mallrats, Tommy Boy. We get introduced to Toy Story. And we also round out with The Usual Suspects, which I love that movie. But for 1995, a movie by David Fincher that I just adore and love, and it's fantastic. Brad Pitt, not Samuel L. Jackson, Morgan Freeman, Kevin Spacey in Seven. Of course, we're talking about the 7 Deadly Sins, and Brad Pitt and Morgan Freeman have to find the killer, and you are on a headspin throughout this movie. It's graphic, it's gritty, it's real. Kevin Spacey is a terrifying villain. So for my pick, 1995, Seven. Moving on, 1996. This is probably the only time you're going to get a horror movie out of me. But 1996 brought us Bottle Rocket. We get introduced to Wes Anderson, The Cable Guy, Fargo, From Dusk Till Dawn, Happy Gilmore, We get introduced again to Will Smith with Independence Day. I don't know why I keep saying introduced to him. He was there anyway. But then we get introduced to Ethan Hunt, I believe it is. Tom Cruise, Mission Impossible. 1996 is the year I get introduced to British movies in Trainspotting. But for my pick, my bang for the buck in 1996, I went to the movie theater a few times and seen this. It scared me. It was gritty. It was real. The kills were great in it. Scream. 1996. Let's put Drew Barrymore in a movie. Let's advertise her as the main person and kill her off in the first act. Can't go wrong with Scream. My 1996 pick for my favorite movie of that year. 1997. Moving on. Boogie Nights. One of my favorite Keanu Reeves, Al Pacino movies, Devil's Advocate. We got John Travolta and Nick Cage in peak craziness and Face Off. We get a quirky movie with Bruce Willis in The Fifth Element. We get probably my favorite Robin Williams acting in Good Will Hunting, which almost took number one on this, but I had to push it aside for something else. Liar Liar, Jim Carrey movie, fantastic movie. And we get a space epic in Starship Troopers that was cheesy and crazy, but so good. 1997, though, how can you go wrong with Men in Black? Will Smith is fantastic in this. Love this movie. Love the whole series, minus International. But you cannot go wrong with this movie at all. So for 1997, Men in Black. 1998. American History X, a great movie. We get the fun Criterion release of Armageddon. The Big Lebowski. We get almost my number one pick for this as well. Blade. Wesley Snipes kills it as the vampire hunter killer. Half Baked. An underrated movie I think everybody should watch. Ronin. Rounders. We get introduced to Jackie Chan and Chris Tucker in Rush Hour. Saving Private Ryan, which I want to go on a slight tangent here. Saving Private Ryan's good in the opening act, but I think it falls apart after that because everybody just starts making stupid decisions. There's Something About Mary, one of my favorite comedies of all time. Also, The Wedding Singer, bar none my favorite Adam Sandler comedy. But for my pick this year, you cannot go wrong with the dramatic acting of Jim Carrey in The Truman Show. This man lives his life under a microscope and is oblivious, and then it slowly starts falling apart and he comes to the realization he's never truly lived. Love this movie. So for my 1998 pick, The Truman Show with Jim Carrey. Can't go wrong. 1998 was the year I graduated. 1999 was a fantastic year for movies. Of course, we had the lead up to Y2K, so everything was a little hectic. But we had American Pie, The Blair Witch Project, Dogma, Fight Club, The Green Mile. One of my favorite horror comedies, Idle Hands. We get the fantastic Jim Carrey movie, Man on the Moon. We get to look at The Matrix, Office Space. M. Night Shyamalan gets with The Sixth Sense. But for my pick, my favorite Martin Scorsese movie, hands down, and probably my favorite Nick Cage movie, hands down, Bringing Out the Dead. If you've not seen this movie, it's kind of a hard watch. It is very kind of specific. It is about paramedics, early 90s New York, and a man trying to deal with his life. But I love this movie. I adore this movie. I can relate to this movie. Love Bringing Out the Dead. So to round out the 90s, 1999, Bringing Out the Dead. 2000 brings some great stuff too. 2000, American Psycho, Boondock Saints. We learn that we shouldn't drive behind a logging truck in Final Destination. One of my low-key favorite underrated movies, Ghost Dog, The Way of the Samurai with Forrest Whitaker. We get Gladiator, Gone in 60 Seconds. The Coen brothers bless us with Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? We get Requiem for a Dream, The Great Road Trip, and Shyamalan gets us again with Unbreakable. But my pick is an Ang Lee movie that is completely, probably one of the most beautiful movies I've ever seen. Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. Michelle Yeoh and Chow Yun-fat. Fantastic movie. If you've never seen this, I highly recommend it. It is an epic wushu movie. The fight scenes in this is fantastic. And Ang Lee just weaves a beautiful story. So for my 2000 pick, Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon for my favorite movie. 2001, we get the biopic, or biography, I guess, or whatever, the telling of Black Hawk Down. When we went into Mogadishu, Durant got shot down, and the efforts to get those men out of there. We get Donnie Darko. We get one of my favorites with Thor Birch and Scarlett Johansson, Ghost World. We get Lord of the Rings, Fellowship of the Ring. We get to look at their beginning of their adventure of an epic book. Memento, one of my favorite Disney animated movies, or Pixar, whichever one, Monsters, Inc. We get to look at the brilliant cast of Ocean's 11, one of my favorite Jet Li movies, The One of my favorite Wes Anderson movies, The Royal Tenenbaums. We get Shrek, an underrated and probably misunderstood Tom Cruise movie in Vanilla Sky, and we get Blue Steel and Zoolander. But my pick for 2001, hands down, probably my favorite Denzel movie, if not my second favorite, and that is Training Day. Denzel and Ethan Hawke kill it in this movie. And when you look at a day in the life of two cops where one is trying to get his own and do what he does, and the other one is just interrupting his flow, and this is a great back and forth struggle between two great lead characters. 2001, Training Day, my pick for my favorite movie of that year. 2002, we get Charlie Kaufman's adaptation. We get to follow up with Blade 2. We get one of my other favorite Scorsese movies in Gangs of New York, and one of my favorite Daniel Day-Lewis pieces. We get Insomnia, John Q, which was just on that other one. We get one of my favorite Vin Diesel movies, Knockaround Guys. Another one of my favorite animated movies of all time, Lilo and Stitch. Men in Black 2. We get a creepy look at Robin Williams in 1 Hour Photo. We get a great little comedy out of Justin Hanks and Jack Black in Orange County. Adam Sandler in a serious role in Punch Drunk Love. We get to see Spider-Man for the first time with Sam Raimi's Spider-Man. Super Troopers. We Were Soldiers. But probably my favorite movie of that year has to be Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers. The action in this, the set pieces, the storytelling, the visuals is just beautiful through this whole movie. And I think this one just barely edges out Return of the King of the best of the three. So 2001, or 2, The Two Towers. How fitting. 222. 2003 comes along. We get Danny Boyle's 28 Days Later, a great zombie-ish movie. Bad Boys 2, where we switch over to the Will Smith vehicle. We get the first taste of Rob Zombie with House of a Thousand Corpses. We get Kill Bill Volume 1. We get Return of the King, a Vin Diesel movie that I think is highly underrated, A Man Apart. We get Old School, which is one of my favorite comedies. Phone Booth. And then we get introduced to Johnny Depp as Captain Jack Sparrow in the Pirates of the Caribbean. But my pick for 2003 is a movie that I love. This movie is beautiful, it's simple, and it's just about two people living in an alien world, just enjoying each other's company and just having simple conversations and living life. That is Sofia Coppola's Lost in Translation with Bill Murray and Scarlett Johansson. If you have not watched this movie, you should. It's just a lovely movie. And it gets my favorite movie of 2003, Lost in Translation. 2004, we get a little bit of everything this year. We get 50 First Dates. We get Anchorman, Dodgeball, Mean Girls. We get one of my favorite Tom Cruise movies in Collateral. We get the Dawn of the Dead remake. We get probably should have taken this spot, but it's a close second. Eternal Sunshine and Spotless Mind with Jim Carrey, one of my favorite Jim Carrey movies. Kill Bill 2, one of my personally loved movies, Ladder 49. We get probably my favorite Denzel movie, Man on Fire. We get Spider-Man 2, which arguably is probably the best Spider-Man. But we got to go with an Edgar Wright powerhouse, Simon Pegg, Nick Frost, for my pick of 2004, Shaun of the Dead. And what is not to love of this movie? It is fantastic. You've got just an oaf that's living his life, not going anywhere. His girlfriend doesn't like him. His roommate doesn't like him. His best friend gets him in trouble. And he thwarts a zombie apocalypse, in a sense. But this is just a great movie. And the mundane life living and how it can really affect you and how you don't pay attention to your surroundings. Love this movie. The Cornetto trilogy is fantastic, but Shaun of the Dead is by far the best. 2005. Starting to slack a little bit here, but we get The 40-Year-Old Virgin. We get Batman Begins, which is great. We get Constantine, one of my favorite Cronenberg pieces in the history of violence. We get Kiss Kiss Bang Bang with Robert Downey Jr. coming back to form. We get one of my favorite Nick Cage's movies next to Bringing Out the Dead and Lord of War. We get the biopic of Walk the Line, which was fantastic. But my favorite movie of that year is just a crude comedy in Waiting. If you haven't seen this, you won't want to eat in a restaurant afterwards if you do watch this. But the cast is fantastic. The humor is fantastic. And the storytelling about working in a restaurant is great, and it's true to life. I mean, it really is how it does happen. I worked in restaurants probably the first 6 years of my life when I started working, and I wanted to become a manager of a restaurant, and I'm glad I didn't. But Waiting is hilarious. Everybody should watch it. So that is my pick for 2005. 2006, Children of Men, a great movie. We get Clerks 2, Little Miss Sunshine, one of my favorites, Lucky Number 11. Pirates of the Caribbean 2, we get The Prestige, The Pursuit of Happiness, which I cry in every time. And we get a look on the world in V for Vendetta. But my pick, another Scorsese movie, because Scorsese knows how to write them. Leonardo DiCaprio, Matt Damon, Jack Nicholson, Mark Wahlberg. How can you go wrong with The Departed? Of course, this is based on the Infernal Affairs out of Asia, and they took the story and they converted it over to this. I would argue Infernal Affairs is better, but with this cast, this lineup, and the way Scorsese weaves this story, you cannot go wrong with The Departed. So for 2006, The Departed, my favorite movie. 2007, 28 weeks later, 30 Days of Night, one of the most fantastic vampire movies I've ever seen. We get This Is Sparta with Gerard Butler in 300. We get the follow-up, Hot Fuzz. We get Juno, Knocked Up, No Country for Old Men, an Adam Sandler piece that I love, Reign Over Me. We get a sci-fi thriller that I think is super underrated in Sunshine. We get probably one of the best comedies of all the 2000s in Superbad. But my pick, my favorite Daniel Day-Lewis piece, and a period piece that was just fantastic, There Will Be Blood. Of course, this is the story of an oil man that basically tries to con his way to the top, and he is brutal about it. Paul Dano is a great supporting actor in this, and this movie is just great. If you've never watched it, it is on par with some of the best movies ever made. But There Will Be Blood, my pick for 2007. 2008, we get The Dark Knight, and I could have easily slipped this in here. But I already had Batman on my list, Batman 1989, and that is my Batman. And don't get me wrong, the Nolan trilogy is fantastic. But we get Forgetting Sarah Marshall, a comedy that I love. We look at Clint Eastwood's Gran Torino and basically a take on racism. We get introduced to Iron Man. Role Models, one of my favorite comedies of the time. Definitely one of my favorite comedies, Step Brothers. Synecdoche, New York, Charlie Kaufman again, with Philip Seymour Hoffman. weaves a beautiful movie. It's a fantastic movie. We get the controversial Tropic Thunder, but I still love it. We get a very fun action movie in Wanted. We get a movie that is heartfelt and probably one of Mickey Rourke's best in The Wrestler. But my pick for 2008 is a dark comedy that I don't think enough people appreciate. I don't think enough people have watched. But In Bruges with Colin Farrell. This movie is just dark. It's humor. It's got humor. It's got a little bit of action. It's got great storytelling. It's got redemption in it. It's got hurt. It's got pain. I love this movie. So if you've never watched In Bruges, I highly recommend it. And that is why this comes in my favorite 2008 movie. We're getting closer, folks. 2009. We get the lovely 500 Days of Summer. We get Brothers. We get The Hangover. The Hurt Locker. I Love You Man. Inglourious Bastards. A great movie in Law Abiding Citizen. We get the always tearful Up from Disney. We get to look at The Watchmen for the first time. We get Zombieland. But a movie that I cannot give enough praise. I praise this movie all the time. I think more people need to watch it. I think it's highly underappreciated. I think it's highly underrated. And that's Sam Rockwell in Moon. Now, this is pretty much a one-man show. There is a robot that is in this that is voiced by Kevin Spacey. But he is on the moon, and they're basically harvesting moon rock and all that, sending it back to Earth for materials. And he thinks he's going to go home. Well, everything comes unhinged, comes unglued, and the story is fantastic. This movie looks beautiful as well. But if you've never seen Moon, I highly recommend it, and it comes in at my 2009 favorite movie of that year. 2010 is a no-brainer for me. I was late on this movie, but it has become my most watched movie, and along with The Crow, my most favorite movie. But other things in 2010, we get The Book of Eli, Hot Tub Time Machine, which is still a classic comedy. We get Inception, Iron Man 2. We get a great Korean thriller in I Saw the Devil. Kick-Ass, The Other Guys. We get Shutter Island. We get the wrap-up to Toy Story in Toy Story 3. We also get probably my favorite Takashi Miike movie out of Japan, 13 Assassins. It's brutal, it's gory, it's bloody, it's action-packed. Love that movie. But for my bang for the buck, Edgar Wright's Scott Pilgrim vs. the World. Love this movie. Michael Cera, Elizabeth Winstead, fantastic. The supporting cast, fantastic. The graphics, fantastic. The action, fantastic. Everything. I love this movie. And I know a lot of people hate this movie, but I love it. And that's why it's my 2010 favorite movie, Scott Pilgrim vs. the World. 2011, 50-50. I love that movie. Joseph Gordon-Levitt is just fantastic. We get Captain America, the First Avenger, Crazy Stupid Love. We get the reboot in Dredd, which, why we never got a sequel to that, I will never know. We get the Fast Five. Probably the best out of the whole series. One of my favorite Statham movies, The Mechanic. We get probably one of the best looking Mission Impossibles in Ghost Protocol. We get our first Thor, and we get the reboot of X-Men First Class, which I thought the reboot was fantastic up until about the third movie. My pick for 2011, though, and I know a lot of people are on the fence about this movie too, but that is the Ryan Gosling and Drive. I love this movie. It's just, the soundtrack's beautiful, the visuals are beautiful, the story is just slow, and it's a slow burn. It's got some brutality in it, and I love that word, brutality. I say it a lot, but I love it. So Drive, my 2011 pick. Can't go wrong with it. 2012, we get The Dark Knight Rises, so we get to finish up with the trilogy. We get Django Unchained from Tarantino. We get a great look at Michael Pena and Jake Gyllenhaal in End of Watch. We get a movie that probably not a lot of people talk about, but it's a lovely movie with Greta Gerwig and Adam Driver. It's called Frances Ha. If you've not seen it, I highly recommend it. We start our journey with The Hobbit and The Unexpected Journey. We get a great sci-fi movie with Looper. We get a fantastic coming-age movie, The Perks of Being a Wallflower. For my pick, And there's not going to be a whole lot of superhero movies on this list, but we get to see the Avengers assemble for the first time, and I loved it. So my pick for 2012 is the Avengers, the first movie. Can't go wrong with that. Moving on to 2013, Dallas Buyers Club, Enemy. We get the Evil Dead remake. One of my favorite Spike Jonze, Joaquin Phoenix movies, Her. We get the brilliant Prisoners. We get a good comedy in This Is the End. A lovely romantic comedy I don't think a lot of people talk about, but they should be. What If with Daniel Radcliffe and Adam Driver. We get the Wolf of Wall Street, a fantastic movie. But a movie I always go back to for 2013. Ben Stiller directed this, and I love it. It's beautiful. It's a great story. The Secret Life of Walter Mitty. If you've never seen this, highly recommend it. He works for Time. He's looking for one of the last photographs sent to him by Sean Penn. And he has to go on a journey to find Sean Penn, to find out where it went when it's been with him almost all along. But the journey he goes on is great. It's a great story. Like I said, the cinematography is fantastic. Secret Life of Walter Mitty. Highly recommended. 2014, we get some good stuff. We get Birdman with Michael Keaton. We get Jon Favreau's Chef. If you've never seen Chef, I highly recommend it. I almost put it as the number one in this year. We get Ex Machina from A24, a fantastic sci-fi movie. Probably one of the best 2010s sci-fi movie ever. We get a look at A Little Tank Company with Brad Pitt, Shia LaBeouf, in Fury. We get the Gone Girl from Ben Affleck. We got probably the most visually stunning Wes Anderson movie, The Grand Budapest Hotel. We get introduced to the Guardians of the Galaxy. We get Interstellar, which easily could be my number one for this year as well. We get introduced to John Wick, Kingsman: The Secret Service, Jake Gyllenhaal again with Nightcrawler. A fantastic movie. He is just scary good in that. Whiplash, Miles Teller, and I can't think of his name, J. Jonah Jameson. Fantastic movie as well. But for me, if I'm going to sit down and watch a superhero movie that will keep me interested from beginning to end, we're going to go with Captain America: The Winter Soldier. By far the best Captain America movie, and probably the number one or number two Marvel movie, period. So, 2014, Captain America: The Winter Soldier. We get introduced to Bucky Barnes coming back, the Winter Soldier. You get basically the split in the team. You get the government coming after them. You get everything. Love this movie. 2014's Captain America: The Winter Soldier. My favorite movie of that year. 2015, there wasn't really a whole lot. Avengers: Age of Ultron. We get a great movie talking about the housing bubble and The Big Short. We get the lovely Hateful Eight. I love that movie. We get look at Mad Max: Fury Road. Tom Hardy killed it in that. We get The Revenant. I love that movie too. We also get Sicario, which was fantastic. But a movie I watch over and over and over. If it's on TV, I've popped it in the DVD or the Blu-ray player several times. Matt Damon in The Martian. And you want to talk about looking beautiful, the 4K on this is fantastic. But I love this story. I can throw it on. It can be on in the background. I know what's going on. I can pop in. I can pop out. Love this movie. You know, he gets left on Mars. The team wants to go back and get him. The government doesn't want them to. And they pull a little maneuver. They go back and get him. And it's just great. Matt Damon does really good portraying a man on the brink of dying and doing everything to keep himself alive. Love this movie. And that is my 2015 pick, The Martian. 2016, we get a great retelling, 13 Hours of Secret Soldiers of Benghazi. Arrival, which probably should be my number one, but there's one thing that eked it out just a little bit. Captain America: Civil War. We get introduced to Deadpool, Doctor Strange, the fantastic La La Land. We get a heartbreaker with Casey Affleck in Manchester by the Sea. We get an underrated buddy cop movie with Gosling and I can't think of his name now. Somebody will remind me. The Nice Guys. Passengers, one of my favorite Adam Driver movies, and Patterson. We get the follow-up to Unbreakable, which we didn't know was a follow-up, with Split. And we get an A24 movie that I love with Daniel Radcliffe, Swiss Army Man. But my pick for 2016, I grew up with Star Wars, the original trilogy. My brother loved them. He had the toys. I played with them. But I've never been a huge fan of Star Wars. But when this movie came out, I was blown away, and I've rewatched it several times. And I think, in my personal opinion, it is the best Star Wars movie. And that is Rogue One, A Star Wars Story. How they weave how New Hope came about and the story of these people trying to get the Death Star plans and how they're all wiped out is fantastic. Of course, the ending of this, when Darth Vader invades the ship, you probably get the most badassery out of Darth Vader you get from any of the movies. But Rogue One is definitely my 2016 pick for best movie. 5 more, folks. 2017, another slow year, but we get Baby Driver, fantastic. Dunkirk, fantastic. We see the end of an era with Logan. We get Spider-Man Homecoming, Thor Ragnarok. We get the great crime thriller Wind River. If you've never seen Wind River, highly recommend it. Jeremy Renner and Elizabeth Olsen kill it in that movie. But I'm going to go with probably a lesser known movie, but a movie that I just think is beautiful. And it's about being a ghost and the boredom of being a ghost. And that's A24's A Ghost Story. So Casey Affleck's married. He dies abruptly. And he comes back as a ghost. And the typical wearing a sheet with the eyes cut out ghost. And he doesn't really do much. And it's just a movie about grieving and coming to grips with stuff. And having to move on with life. And it really does show how boring it is to be a ghost. It's not all fancy throwing pots and pans and all that good stuff. But my favorite movie, probably a controversial pick for 2017 as my favorite, is A Ghost Story. 2018, Annihilation. We get Avengers Infinity War. We get Black Panther. Bohemian Rhapsody. Seth Rogen's debut with mid-90s. Mission Impossible Fallout. John Krasinski's A Quiet Place. We get to see Lady Gaga open up and be A Star Is Born. We get a sleeper in Upgrade. If you've never seen Upgrade, it's a great sci-fi movie. Fantastic. My pick, though, and it'll be the last of any of the superhero movies, my favorite Spider-Man movie, even beating out No Way Home. Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, the animated movie. Looks great in 4K too, by the way. Most animated movies don't, but this looks fantastic in 4K. But it's the story of Miles Morales coming to grips of Peter Parker's death and then actually becoming Spider-Man and getting opened up into the Spider-Verse where he meets other Spider-Men. And this opens up the Marvel Universe to such great things. But the storytelling, the music, the visuals, the fights, everything is fantastic in this movie. How can you not love it? Unless you just hate Spider-Man. 2018, Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. My favorite movie of the year. 2019. Again, not a whole lot, but we get 1917. Fantastic movie. We wrap up the arc, 11 years of Marvel with Avengers Endgame, which easily could have been my number one. Probably one of my favorite Guy Ritchie movies, In the Gentleman. Jojo Rabbit. We get Joaquin Phoenix's The Joker, which was outstanding. We get Knives Out. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. We get a great Korean movie in Parasite. We get something from Shia LaBeouf I did not expect. The Peanut Butter Falcon. Spider-Man Far From Home. We get a great movie from the Safdie brothers with Adam Sandler and Uncut Gems. But my pick, I believe this was a Netflix, I could be wrong, it may have been Hulu, movie that I'm glad the Criterion Collection picked up. Adam Driver, Scarlett Johansson, and The Marriage Story. This is such a heart-wrenching, heartbreaking movie. You know, it details basically their split in their marriage and what they go through with divorce lawyers and the breakdown of two people. And I love this movie. It's like I said, heart-wrenching. The scene where they finally come to blows in the apartment over everything and they just start screaming and yelling at each other. It's just heartbreaking. And such great acting from these two. Easily one of my favorite movies of the 2010s. So 2019, my favorite movie, Marriage Story. Love it. 2020, you know, we had COVID. We started having a breakdown in society. Movie theaters started getting shut down. Movie production started getting shut down. There wasn't a whole lot, but we did have Bad Boys for Life, the return of Martin Lawrence and Will Smith, which was fantastic. We had something from Pete Davidson, which surprised me because I really didn't care for him, but The King of Staten Island, great movie. One that blew me away that I was not expecting, and that's Love and Monsters. If you haven't seen it, it's a great little love story about love and monsters. Steven Yeun, Minari, about a Korean family coming to America to try to make it. If you've not seen Minari, highly recommend it. Promising Young Woman, another great movie with a great twist. We get Mads Mikkelsen with Riders of Justice, a very, I don't think, talked about enough movie. Fantastic movie. We get Tenet, and I know there was a ton of problems with it. I waited until it came on home video. I picked it up. I didn't have any issues with the audio. I thought Tenet was mind-blowing. The way Christopher Nolan took his movie and twisted it on its edge, I loved it. But for 2020, a movie that I've rewatched several times, it blew me away. J.K. Simmons, that's J. Jonah Jameson, that from earlier in the video. But J.K. Simmons, Kristen Milioti, which I believe is her very first movie ever, and she killed it, and Adam Sandberg, Palm Springs. Now, I never really cared for Andy Samberg too much. I mean, I went back since and watched some of his other stuff. I love Popstar, Don't Never Stop Stopping, and Hot Rod. But this movie, it's Groundhog Day, only for a modern age, and it's dark. It's funny. It's just a fantastic movie. And this is a German copy. I believe we never got a Blu-ray copy in... Actually, I don't think we ever got a release period in America. So I had ordered this from Germany. But Palm Springs is fantastic. It's highly rewatchable, and you can always catch something different throughout. 2020. Lackluster year, but if I'm going to pick something and watch it, Palm Springs gets my choice. 2021. I'm going to be honest. I haven't watched a lot of the 2021 releases. Anymore nowadays in my collecting, I'm buying boutique stuff, I'm buying older stuff, and the new stuff that comes out, unless it's a steelbook, I just pick up later down the road, and then I watch it eventually. But what I did watch of the year, there were some great things. Free Guy surprised me. We had the great Ridley Scott doing The Last Duel. Affleck, Damon, Driver, fantastic. We get The Little Things with Jared Leto and Denzel Washington, and Rami Malek. I thought was fantastic. A lot of people didn't like it. I thought it was the greatest slow burn of 2021. We got Nobody, which I think surprised everybody. We got Nick Cage returning to form, you could say, in a great movie, Pig. Marvel came back with Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. I had a lot of fun with that movie. Kristen Stewart with Spencer. And then we had, of course, the third Spider-Man movie with No Way Home, which could easily be my number one here, but superhero movies, you just got too many of them. We've been oversaturated for the last 13 years with those. But my pick, a fantastic movie that I think is beautiful. It's written and directed by David Lowery. It's from A24. Story of, Gawain, Sir Gawain, played by Dev Patel in The Green Knight. This is a fantastic movie. It's beautiful. The story is beautiful. And it doesn't go nowhere. It just kind of wanders. But it's a wonderful, wonderful wander. The Green Knight. That is my 2021 pick for my favorite movie. So there you have it, folks. 1979 to 2021. Every year, my favorite movie. I hope you enjoyed this video. I love doing videos like this because it really makes me do my homework. I go back and I analyze my collection. I analyze my likes and dislikes over the years, my changing taste in things. And I really think this list puts together my eclectic choices through the years, the movies that I do like. And I like a lot of stuff. But again, thank you for joining me through this journey. This is going to be a little bit of a long video. Like I always say, it's Ryan from Movies with Ryan. And until I see you again, have a fantastic night.